Okay. Shavua Tov and Boker Tov.
Yeah, Boker Tov.
Rav Shechter tells a story about a shiur given by Rav Soloveitchik on Masechet Sukkah. And in the shiur, the Rav discussed the question of the many leniencies that we find in Chazal for the number of walls that the sukkah needs. As you know, there are many leniencies, and even if there is some gap, if it's not too wide, we can overlook it and still kosher the sukkah. And one student raised his hand, and he said, I guess with some mischief, and said, you know, Rab, I read that the reason why the sages were so lenient with the amount of wood, basically, that you need in order to build the sukkah is because in the time of the Romans, there was a shortage of wood in Eretz Israel. And so the sages found ways how to still keep Sukkot possible. And the Rav immediately answered. He said, you know, what was the reason they were able to investigate and to study, research, and found the secret of the nuclear power of the atom? That was obviously part of a very specific historical occurrence, which was World War II. Does that mean that nuclear power worked because of World War II? We should differentiate between explaining something and understanding it, meaning explaining the way it came to the world and the historical circumstances, and understanding the phenomena to itself. And you can understand everything about the historicity of the coming to being of nuclear power, and you understand nothing about physics. So what you should really aim to is not necessarily to understand. It can be interesting, the historical circumstances, but if it works, it is true, it is real, then the thing in itself is more interesting than the way that it was revealed to human beings. So the Rav told him it may very well be that the way that Chachamim came to their conclusion, the pressure that was put into them to investigate so much into the questions of Sukkah was really in specific historical circumstances. But that doesn't mean that the halacha is not real. And really understanding the halacha is understanding it from itself, from within, and not what were the historical pressures that maybe encouraged the sages to go deeper into the halacha and understand it deeply and deeper. So that is a very, I think, telling story, which both tell a very important aspect, almost a pillar of Rav Soloveitchik's notes to his students as the Rav, or the Rav. So about his thought, we are being told about his thought, but also it casts some type of a shadow over the whole project that I am trying to do here. Meaning, in the last 3 years, what we are doing here, we are learning about the biography of rabbis and their Torah out of a certain assumption that understanding the Rebbe's biography gives us an insight into his Torah. And Rav Soloveitchik basically says, no, that is wrong. That is just as understanding Oppenheimer better or Einstein better does not give you a better insight into physics. So that was his claim. However, it's also extremely interesting that, you know, autobiography is not usually an endeavor taken by rabbis. It's very rare. So when I prepare this shiurim, I usually need to find others describing the Rav I want to speak about. However, when we come to Rav Soloveitchik, I can use a lot of autobiographic material. Now, he did not produce any autobiography, but in his works again and again, he tells personal stories. So I found it extremely interesting. It's not a contradiction, but on one hand, he believed that the historical biography does not have an impact on Torah. Torah must be understood from within. and not from without. He was vehemently opposed to historization, or psychologization, or socialization of Torah learning. Very much opposed to it. However, he believed that the biography of the giants of Torah, and of course he was speaking about his family, which I will describe in a second, does not impact, but it does reflect the ideas of Torah, the ideas of Yahadut, of Judaism, as he liked to speak about it. So on one hand, as I said, there is a shadow cast over our shiur by the Rav's thought, but on the other hand, maybe if we would use his biography as in order to have a glimpse into what Isha Halacha, the man of Halacha is, then I think would be completely according to his own instructions. So after this short introduction, just another two short qualifications. One is that as many others of the giants of Torah that we are speaking about in the last few months, there is a wealth of material written, recorded, said about Rav Soloveitchik, and I am not an expert, and I don't have I apologize, I don't have neither the time nor the expertise to go through everything and construct something which should be the best representation of the true character of Rav Soloveitchik. And here there is another problem. It seems that no one up till now thinks that he is good enough in order to produce such a biography, because I think what I'm just about to say is extremely surprising, because he is one of the Torah rabbis most studied in the last 50 years. I think that can be said easily. There is no book form biography of Rav Soloveitchik. We spoke about Rav Schneerson, about the Lubavitcher Rebbe. I don't know, there are 10 biographies about him. And we spoke about Rav Kook. So Rav Kook, now they are having biographies over the first 20 years of Rav Kook. So biographies abound. We come to Rav Soloveitchik. There are a few short messages, right, that were written as a initial introduction to the writing of a biography, towards building a biography, but still, to my knowledge, and I think I know, no biography, full form biography is yet to be written. Rav Rekefet wrote 2 books, 2 volumes, very nice, with personal stories, but these are not biographies, and he doesn't see them, he himself doesn't see them as biographies. I think the best we have for now, there is a book. This is the Hebrew version. There is an English version. It was written by Rav Reuven Ziegler, or Ronnie Ziegler, a student of Rav Soloveitchik. He works in Magid. He is also a part of the Yeshiva Har Etzion, where I teach. I had the zchut to meet him, to teach one of his sons, and so that is like an intellectual biography, you may say. So he's going through the different topics the Rav dealt with, and he's trying to analyze them. However, there is a short introduction called Introduction to the Life and Thought of Rav Soloveitchik, in which he said, we're still waiting for a good biography, and he gives a few facts. So that's, I think, the best that we have for now, and that was also, as I said, there is an English version of that very book, which can be both from Magid, from Cohen, and also is at least the majority of it is accessible in the Yeshiva Har Etzion website. In Mirza Hashem, if I would remember, I would send the link. I was also using this book called Emunah Bizmanim Mishtanim, Faith in Changing Times, in Turbulent Times, which has an introduction. The whole book is about the Mishnah, the Torah of Rav Soloveitchik. The editor is Avi Sagi, Professor Avi Sagi, and there we have a biography by Rav Aaron Rekefet Rutkov, which I mentioned earlier, also another student of the Rav. It's a 30 pages biography, it is chunky, but it still obviously doesn't do justice to the figure of the Rav Soloveitchik, that obviously at least demands a book to itself, if not 2 or 3. However, other materials, there is endless. My father-in-law, the father of Nina, so Professor Dov Schwartz, he alone wrote 4 books on Rav Soloveitchik thought. I think the fifth one is being printed now. So that's and that is only one writer. There are many others in English and in Hebrew, also some in French. Again, so that's something that a qualification. So obviously, I'm working with what I was able to amass. And last, and with that we would begin. Here there is also a personal connection, as I think you can feel it now. I'm my Mori Rabbi Rav Aharon Lichtenstein was the son-in-law and also the Talmid Muvhak of Rav Soloveitchik. So while I have never met Rav Soloveitchik, and I was born in 1984, so I couldn't really learn anything from him. However, obviously his figure is very towering in a place like the Yeshiva that I learned in and that I teach in. And that is, on one hand, it's positive for such a shiur because it means that I do know some. On the other hand, obviously, that even puts more difficulties on the attempt to have an objective and up from above biography of Rav Soloveitchik. But again, you have to sustain that. Yes. Yeah, I think. Oh, yeah. I think we have here maybe. So maybe there is another person here maybe that learned by Rav Soloveitchik. No, but yeah. So yeah. So Baruch Hashem. Yeah. Yeah. So as I said, again, if someone wants to replace me here and give the shiur, I won't object for 1 minute. I try to do my best, and of course I would be very happy if you'd want to comment as we are going through the shiur. I would be very happy. So we would split our learning of Rav Soloveitchik life and Torah into 3. That's my plan. So today we would speak about, if I will be successful, about the first 30 years of Rav Soloveitchik, meaning coming up to the second when he would become the Rosh Yeshiva in YU. Then next week, Be'ezrat Hashem, we would speak about almost 30, or it's not really 30, it's 30, 25. So that's the way that we are going to split it. And that's enough for introduction. We should really get going. Our story begins in 1903, 27th of February, Yud Bet Be'adar, in the city Frozhny in Russia. That's today Belarus, but it replaced hands, I don't know, 10 times in the last 100 years and probably more. So now he's being born. What is Rothschild for money is Soloveitchik for Torah, at least in the Lithuanian circles. He is a descendant almost of every Lithuanian Torah giant you can think about. So all these families married each other, and he is, as I said, he can claim almost every Torah scholar of the last 200 years in Lithuania as one of his fathers. So it is on one side, of course, the family of Soloveitchik. So family of Soloveitchik, it's his father, Reb Moshe Soloveitchik. His grandfather is Reb Chaim Soloveitchik and Reb Chaim of Brisker. The father of Chaim of Brisker is the famous Rav Yosef Dov Soloveitchik, that is the Beit HaLevi. All of these, I think we had shiurim about. And he is named, obviously, after the father of his grandfather, his great-grandfather, Rav Yosef Dov Soloveitchik. And beyond that, he is also a descendant of Reb Chaim of Volozhin. He is a descendant of the Natziv. So all of these are his family. Volozhin, you may say, is his homeland. As a yeshiva of Volozhin, the mother of all yeshivot, European yeshivot, is the place he is coming as his origin. That's where he's coming from. In his mother's side, she was a Feinstein. Here is a little irony. So she is a Feinstein, and he was I think Ben Dod. How do you say Ben Dod in English? A cousin. He was a cousin of Moshe Feinstein. However, not because his mother was a Feinstein. His mother was a Feinstein, and his mother was a Feinstein, and her sister married the father of Rav Moshe Feinstein. It's a different Feinstein. Rav Moshe Feinstein was a Halevi Feinstein. And this Feinstein, from the side of his mother, were not Levim. So that's just a quirk of history, that in the end, it's a Feinstein, and he was a cousin of Rav Moshe Feinstein, but not because the same Feinstein. I don't know, maybe 10 generations earlier, it was the same Feinstein, but he was a cousin of Rav Moshe Feinstein. His father said was Rav Moshe Soloveitchik. His mother was Pesha, Pishka, Pashka. I saw the name spelled in many different ways. And there are here somewhat of a different, you may say, hashkafot worldviews coming from the side of his father and his mother. The Soloveitchik family is, both of them are extremely Torah land scholar. However, the Soloveitchik side is more of a kanai, more of a pious, only Torah. Reb Chaim Soloveitchik was extremely opposed to Zionism, to Haskalah, to secular knowledge, to everything that basically is not Gemara. According to the stories, he made his son, Reb Moshe Soloveitchik, the father of Rav Yosef Dov Soloveitchik, he made him swear that he would not learn the Moreh Nevuchim, the guide of the perplexed. Why? Because that made him into philosophy. So that is the extent to which there was their opposition to secular knowledge. However, the Feinstein side was much more open, and his mother was well versed in Russian literature, also in Hebrew literature of the Maskilic. So that's a very different side. Now, again, both of them, don't be mistaken for a second, both of them extremely observant in any stretch of the imagination that you can take. However, there were different of orientation in the relation to the outside world, meaning outside of the yeshiva. The Soloveitchik, now Torah. And the Feinsteins were more open. I want to begin immediately with a childhood experience that he describes. I will also share it in the Zoom.
But this is in English.
Yes, he said it in English.
Yeah. English.
It was originally written in Yiddish. I'm not sure. It's a quote from Vikashtem Misham. So it was so Yiddish. Yeah, so that's but Yiddish I couldn't find over there. Maybe you can find that as well. I don't know.
Google Translate.
Google Translate, Google Translate can do everything. Okay. Okay, so just a second. I'm sharing it also on the Zoom. Here it is. Okay, so the first source, and I apologize for my broken English reading that. It is such a beautiful language, and it would be ruined, but I hope that you'd still be able to feel the majestic through my reading. So that is from a husband he gave to the Rebbetzin of Telne. The Rebbetzin of Telne was the mother of his son-in-law, Rav Tversky. So his older daughter married, our hero, Rav Yosef Dov Soloveitchik, had a daughter. She married Rav Tversky. The mother of Rav Tversky was the Rebbetzin of Telne. And when she passed away, he gave her husband a eulogy. And that is from the eulogy, speaking about the different you'd say different masorah, different traditions that he received from his father and his mother. So if people are mistaken in thinking that there is only one masorah and one masorah community, the community of the fathers. So people think that they only learn Torah from their fathers. This is not true. We have two masorot, two traditions. What is the difference between those two masorot traditions? What is the distinction between Musar Avicha and Torah Imecha, right? The Torah that you learn from your father and the Torah you learn from your mother? Let us explore what one learns from the father and what one learns from the mother. One learns from father. And here, obviously, he is giving his own experience. He's going to say explicitly in a second. How to read the text. Now, I don't know if all of us learned from our fathers how to read the text, but that was his experience. So how to read the text, the Bible or the Talmud, how to comprehend, how to analyze, how to conceptualize, how to classify, how to infer, how to apply, etc. We also learn from father what to do, what not to do, what is morally right, what is morally wrong. But what is Torah Timecha? What kind of a Torah does the mother pass on? I admit that I am not able to define precisely the Masoretic role of the Jewish mother. By circumscription, I hope to be able to explain it, permitting to draw upon my own experiences. So here you see how he uses his own life as a reflection of the ideal life. And he says, I used to have long conversations with my mother. In fact, it was a monologue rather than a dialogue. A good Jewish mother. So it was a monologue. And he says, she talked and I happened to overhear. What did she talk about? I must use an Halakhic term in order to answer this question. She talked from the order of the day. So what does he mean? I used to watch her arranging the house in honor of a holiday. I used to see her recite prayers. I used to watch her recite the Siddur every Friday night. So she was learning Shnai Mikra ve'Echad Targum, I guess. So she was reciting the Siddur, the Parshat Shavua. And I still remember the nostalgic tune. So she was reading it aloud, and he as a child would stand there and listen. Now I would guess that maybe he was very young. He still couldn't understand even what she says. But seeing your mother reading with a tune, the Parsha, that makes an everlasting impression on his soul. I learned from her very much. Most of all I learned that Judaism expresses itself not only in formal compliance with the law, but also in a living experience. She taught me that there is a flavor, a scent, and warmth to mitzvot. I learned from her the most important thing in life, to feel the presence of the Almighty and the gentle pressure of his hand resting upon my frail shoulders. Without her teachings, which quite often were transmitted to me in silence, meaning just by observing her, I would have grown up, that's a very strong language, a soulless being, dry and insensitive.
I have to go to cardiologist. I have to get.
So that is, I think, really amazing. That is really, so he says, if I would have gone only with my father, now if his father, we would see, he taught him for years,
Microphones on Zoom.
almost everything. Just a second.
Like I can do it like she can do it.
I don't know how to
Because I have to stop
quiet
taking
the
it
Zoom.
for that reason, you gotta cancel the thing.
Yes, because of
Sally, can you mute your? Oh, thank you.
Okay, so that's amazing. So if everything that his father gave him, he felt that if not for his mother, he would have knowledge, the compliance, as he calls it, but a soulless being. And the soul was given from his mother. So what you can see is that he is not taking, I explained it, I did some historicism. I said that because the Soloveitchiks were of one type and the Feinsteins were of another type. But he doesn't go that way because he never go into historicity or psychology. He goes into the concept. What is the concept of a father and the concept of a mother? And the concept of the father is the concept of the law. And the concept of the mother is the concept of the being. Right? That's what he says. Now, it may be that for some of us, with a different living experience. For some of us, it may be that we learn the law from our mothers and the warmth from our fathers. That may be more rare, but I don't think that it would never exist. And I don't think he would oppose that. It doesn't, what he's trying to give us are the concepts. Now, the concepts can take different forms. That's one of the most important tenets of philosophy. That is that you should be able to distinguish between the actual form and the inner essence. So the essence of the father is the essence of giving the law. The essence of the mother is the essence of giving the warmth, the being, the living experience. Now, it may be that in a certain family, one would sometimes play the essence of the father and sometimes the essence of the mother, and vice versa. It also may be, and I think it is, that in most of the families, most of the times, the father is the essence of the law, and the mother is the essence of this warmth and gentleness. But again, we are not looking into something that is rigid. We're looking to something that should inspire and enrich our Jewish life and our family life. The laws of Shabbat, for instance, were passed on to me, but by my father. They are a part of Musar Avicha. So the 39 works that one is not allowed to do on Shabbat. But the Shabbat as a living entity, as a queen, was revealed to me by my mother. That is part of Torah Timecha. The fathers know much about Shabbat. The mothers live the Shabbat. Experience their presence and perceive their beauty and splendor. The fathers taught generations how to observe the Shabbat. Mother taught generations how to greet the Shabbat and to enjoy a 24-hour presence. I think that's a beautiful description. And that's how he describes his own experience as a child growing up in such a beautiful home.
Yeah, he learned without speaking, right?
Yes. Just observing. Another story, a beautiful one, maybe more famous, here it's in Hebrew, that is from ביקשתם משם. רצוני לספר על דבר חוויה אישית שתדגים את האידאה של המסורה. So I want to tell a personal experience, he says, that would exemplify the idea of tradition. זכורי, I remember, כדוד התריה, when I was a child, and it must be very young. It must be, according to what you say in a second, it must be that he was less than 7, the story that he's relating to now. So when I was a child, so he shares with us that he was an only child, and truth is, I can understand it. He was a son of the most prominent man in almost Orthodox Europe, Jewish Orthodox Europe. And he was a prodigy to itself. And his father was teaching him single-handedly, so he didn't go to school. He went to Yeshiva. So he was lonely. And he says that. He was lonely and I don't even, alone and lonely. Almost desolated. Isolated. These are strong words. He was scared from the external world. It was cold and foreign, the word. I thought that everyone is mocking me. So he's very telling here about his childhood. However, I had one friend. Don't laugh at me. Hermann. His friend was the Hermann. How did we become friends? So we met. Now again, we're speaking about a child less than 7 years old. He was a usual visitor, a guest. שיעוריו של אבא היו ניתנים בטרקלין של בית סבא. So my father was giving שיעורים in the home of the grandfather. Now the grandfather is fine, because you have to remember, at that time when someone got married, he went and lived with the father of his new wife for a few years, and then his father-in-law would sustain him so you can return and continue his learning. So that's in Frozhna, at the Feinstein's house. So we know that he left Frozhna, Frozhny. He left Frozhny less than 7 years old. So that's why I'm saying that the story must be from age 6, 5. So his father would give the shiurim in his grandfather living hall, בטרקלין. שם עמדה מיטתי, and again, Baruch Hashem, we live in houses, right? And you have a room for this child and a room for that child. If you put 3 children in one room, that's that's something that can sue you afterwards. So, the houses were very small. People were extremely poor. And the bed of the child was in the living hall. You had a living hall, You had sometimes a kitchen, sometimes the kitchen was outside, and you had another room for the parents. That was considered very good. If you had a separate room for the parents, that was considered very good. And the child was there, and his father was giving a shiur. Okay, so he's trying to get asleep, but his father is giving a shiur, so he's listening. דרכי הייתה לשבת במיטתי ולהאזין לדברי אבא. So I would sit in my bed and listen to my father. מה דיבר תמיד על שיעורים about the Rambam, he says. Everything was about the Rambam. וכך היה עושה, and that's how my father was do. היה פותח את הגמרא, הוא פותח את הגמרא. read סוגיה. Then he would say the following. This is the explanation of Free and the Tosfot. Now let's look at the Rambam and see how he explains. Always father would find that the Rambam did not explain as Rashi and the Tosfot and the other Mefarshim, ונטר מהדרך הפשוטה, and went off the paved way, the king's way. הבמרי היה אומר, so my father would always say, כמעט תלונה, always complaining, Rambam. We do not understand. Not is the reason of our Rabbi, meaning the reason of Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon, the reason of our Rav, ולא את אופן הסוגיה, not how he reads the sugya. By the way, pay attention, these are two separate questions. The concept and the textual commentary. That's a seed I'm planting now. Okay, continue. Small, it's almost seems that he is complaining against the Rambam himself. מדוע עשית זאת? Rambam, why do you read the Gemara in such a complicated way? It seems my father would continue in the shiur, and that's every shiur. הרייבד בהשגותיו צודק. הרייבד הוא wrote השגות, objections against the Rambam. So it seems that the Ravid is right. So the students, everyone would raise his hand or almost jump from his seat and try to offer a defense for the Rambam, for Maimonides. The father would listen to them, reject each one. These are very devoted students. You come every night, you give your answer to the question of the Rambam would explain to you wrong, and then continue to give his own, and that's how Torah is being learned, right? In Masa Umatan. Nowadays we have a little more of a lecture mode, but back in the day, in the yeshivot, sometimes the lecturer would hardly be able to get a few sentences across. So of course it has its own deficiencies, but Torah was very much alive. There was fire on the table. And then Amar rejected all the answers that were given. Amar would have said again, the words of our master, the words of Maimonides, are as hard as iron, being difficult to decipher. But he did not raise his hands. And by the way, I don't have the picture here, but there is a very famous picture of Rav Soloveitchik himself sitting like that, and I understand that his shiurim, he would also do it from time to time when there was a good question. He would sit like that and think in the middle of a shiur. That can take sometimes for 10 or 20 minutes, and then you have to remember the shiurim were lasting for 3 hours, so a time 2 hours. So it's he had the time to think. And but he says my father would sit like that. Everyone was quiet. No one wanted to disturb the Rav Moshe, right, his father, from thinking. And then he would raise his head and begin slowly. And you can imagine the child sitting on his bed and looking at his father, and there is real tension in the air. It's a drama. It's not just a lecture about some philosophical concept. It's a drama. And he would begin to speak. Gentlemen, let's see. Sometimes you'd have a long explanation to defend the Rambam. Sometimes it would be short. I don't understand anything. מדובר. רושם כפול מתרקם במוחי התמים והצבע. Two things were impressing my young mind. The Rambam is encircled with enemies and they want to do something big to him. The second, the only defender the Rambam has is my father. Without father, לולא אבא, מי יודע מה היה קורה לרמב"ם? Who knows what would happen to the Rambam without my father? That's how he felt. הייתי מרגיש כי הרמב"ם בעצמו נוכח כאן בטרקלין ושומע. He says, I felt the Rambam himself is standing here and he's looking to my father. יושב עמדי במיטתי, he was not just standing, he was sitting next to me in the bed. That's how, as a child, right, without any friends, but he would sit there on the bed and Rambam is sitting next to him, waiting for his father to give the defense. מה היה מראינו? Now, how did the Rambam look like? Well, he sat next to me in my bed. לא ידעתי בדיוק. I'm not sure. יפות מאוד. He says, but he was very similar to my father. So, he was also named Moshe, just like my father. אבא היה מדבר, תלמידים בעיניים מוצאות באבא היו שומעים בדיחול. So again, he looks at his father, obviously he adores his father, and his father gives the shiur, and all the students concentrated, and every word, right, no one is in his phone, no phones yet. You can imagine giving a shiur before phones. So he gave the shiur, everyone is concentrated on what Moshe has to say. לאט לאט פגה המתיחות, צעד בעוז ובגבול, סברות חדשות בקוב. That's poetry. That's poetry. I hope that you can somehow understand some of this of the Hebrew. That's poetry here and there. He says, my father was walking with stride, and the light was shining, and new ideas were revealed. קושיות נתיישבו. So all the questions were answered. הסוגיה נתפרשה. The סוגיה was explained. הרמב"ם יצא כמנצח. The Rambam was a winner. פני אבא היו מקריבים שמחה וגיל. My father, I would tell you, I think that he is based here on the description of the Cohen Gadol going out of Bet Kodesh HaKodashim in our tefillah on Musaf of Yom Kippurim, right? Everything is... that is in the same tulant here. So father was defending his friend. But you see here, it's very important. The most basic relationship he has to Torah study is not the intellectual, but the emotional. The Rambam is his friend. Before the questions of is he right or wrong, he is his friend. Then we go to Maimonides. He said, I saw the Rambam smiling. גם אני השתתפתי בשמחה זו. אני שמח הייתי, so I would also participate in the happiness. הייתי קופץ ממיטתי, רץ מהר לחדר, he would run fast to his mother, ובשורה מרנינות לב בפי, and inform her, אמא, הרמב"ם צודק. A 5-year-old child runs to his mother, אמא, the Rambam is right, הוא ניצח את הרייבד, right, he overcame the רייבד, אבא עזר לו, אז our father helped him, כמה נפלא הוא אבא, it is father, that's beautiful, as our part is, of course, it's a beautiful description. It's a beautiful description. But as I said, he opposes me using that in order to explain his Torah. What can I do? He also gave me the key. So, פרקים לא תקופות, but he continues. Early, but it did happen. לא בעיר מזלו של הרמב"ם. The Rambam star didn't shine. אויביו וקיפו מכל צד. The enemies were besieging him. הקושיות היו קשות כברזל, the questions were as hard as iron, דבריו נפלאו מהגמר, and father was not able to explain the words of the Rambam. הוא ניסה בכל כוחו להגיד עליו, he tried with his best, אבל הישועה לא באה, but redemption didn't come. משתקע בהרהורים כשראשו נשען על אגרופו, father would think and think with his head on his fist. התלמידים, אני והרב, סמוך תיקחו את דברי אבא מתוך מתיחות נוראה. So me, the students, we all waited. However, אבא היה מרים ראשו ואומר בעצבות, תיקו. So father would stand up and say, that's a תיקו, I cannot answer the question. דברי הרמב"ם קשים מאוד והדבר נשאר בצריך עיון, it should remain for further analysis. כל חבורה בתוכה הייתה עצובה. So they were all so sad. A shiur that ends without a solution. So they would all be so sad. בתולת פורשת ובוכה. Now again, if you remember, that's about the Cohen Gadol, that when they would make him swear that he would not act as the Sadukis on Yom Kippurim, they say that everyone then would cry for having to make him swear. So again, this is maybe a reference to the Yom Kippur. יגון חמישי השתפך על כל פנים. Cry as a child, because his friend lost. גם בעיני הרמב"ם הייתי רואה גני דמעה נוצצים. רמב"ם also had tears in his eyes. לאט הייתי בא אל אמא והייתי אומר לה בלב קרוע, בוא ליישב את הרמב"ם, he says, אבא cannot defend רמב"ם. What can we do? אל תצטער, הייתה אמא עונה, נמצא תירוץ על דברי הרמב"ם. fine, next round. ואם הוא לא נמצא, אולי אתה כשתגדל תיישב את דברי הרמב"ם. So if you would not find, then maybe you, when you would grow up, you would be able to defend the Rambam. Now that's how you plant seeds of education for greatness in a child. אבל עיקר העיקרים הוא תוך שמחה והתפעלות. But his mother told him, that's obviously is connected to what we saw earlier. His mother told him the most important thing, you would find a teirutz, you would not find a teirutz. The most important thing is to learn Torah בשמחה, with happiness, ובהתפעלות, with emotion, not just as a analytical, some philosophical interrogation, right, that someone does in his time of relax. It must be something that activates you, that you are completely, emotionally, intellectually engaged with. חוויה זו שייכת לעיני ילדותי. Now, I attend to Rav Soloveitchik, he says, this experience was obviously in my childhood. אבל בכל זאת היא לא פנטזיה של ילד קטן, it's not a small child fantasy. הרגשה זו במיסטיקה, it's not some mystic. היא מציאות פסיכולוגית היסטורית גמורה. He says, Rambam was really there. Not because mystically he was there, not because I had fantasies as a small child, but the historical, psychological aspect of Torah learning means that I would not dare to say that, but when you learn, you're supposed to feel that the Rav that now speaks is not just his words or not just written in the page. They are being said. The Torah is Torah shebaal peh. So you always hear it from his mouth. He says, so that is a complete reality, psychologically, historically, שחיה גם עכשיו בעמקי נשמתי. To this day, he says, I feel it in my kishkes, בעמקי נשמתי. Okay, so as I said, that's the experience of his childhood. In 1910, his father moves to Russian in order to become the Rav there, and 3 years later, they move to Chasalovich, where again his father becomes the Rav of the Jewish community. But before that, in Russian, as I said, when he moved in the age of 10, his father sent him to a local teacher, a local Rebbe. I mean, he didn't send him, he brought the teacher in. Now the Rebbe was the Rebbe, this teacher, was a certain Chabad Chassid, was a Talmid Chacham, they have their name, his name here, but he was a Chabad, and he thought it's more important that the child would learn some Tanya. He understood that Rav Yosef Dov would have enough Gemara training throughout his life. So what was important for him was to teach him the Tanya of Chabad. So they would sit with the Gemara, so if the father would come in, he would see Gemara, but beneath the Gemara, they had a Tanya. And he taught him Tanya for almost a year. Suddenly, the parents began to feel, they would ask him questions, and and the child will not know the tractate, the Gemara, that he's supposed to be learning. And in the end, it's so interesting. It was his mother that said to his father, to Rav Moshe, she said to him, you must, with all due respect, give the Melamed his salary and send him away, and you need to teach your own son. And when she said it, then Rav Moshe accepted. And from there on, Rav Yosef Dov, the young Yosef Dov, began to learn with his father. Now, with his father he learned many Masechtot. It's amazing. He gives a whole list of the Masechtot, almost the whole Shas. He learned from his father, and he would quote him throughout his adult life many times. And quote him, quote his grandfather, and they say that in a shiur, when he would give a chidush, if it was his own chidush, it would be very easy if someone would prove him wrong, or just have a good question, then he would back out of his own chidush. But if he would say something on the name of his father, his grandfather, then he would go to any length in order to try and defend it. That was the amount of identification that he had with the Brisker method, right, with the way of Torah learning that he got from his father. Now, we have to understand, it was not easy to learn in Brisker. And it is not easy. It is not easy. I think it is not easy to learn from your father in any setting, because it's somewhat complicating the relationship when you add more and more layers to it. However, in Brisker, Torah was everything. So I think all of us understand that if a child would try to put his hand into an electrical socket, you'd put pressure on his hand, right? If not to maybe mention harsher excesses you'd go into in order to make sure that he never does it again. But if a child runs to the street, then you would catch him, and if there is a need, give him a patch. Because he must remember, it must be engraved into him. That is something you never do. They felt the same about Torah learning. So what we are going to read now would be, it's not going to be easy to digest. But it is important to understand from where Rav Soloveitchik, the Rav, is coming from. So let's now read, that is from an article written, it's based on an oral lecture given by Rav Lichtenstein, the son-in-law of Rav Soloveitchik. And let's read the following. So it's source given. So the father, Rav Soloveitchik, there were three brothers. There was Rav Moshe Soloveitchik, there was Rav Yosef, Rav Yitzhak Zev, Rav Velvale, and there was Rav Shmuel Yaakov. So both Rav Velvale and Rav Moshe became Rabbanim. Rav Moshe Soloveitchik became the head of YU, and Rav Velvale came here to Israel. It's called the Brisker Rav. And Shmuel Yaakov, Rav Shmuel Yaakov, was a Torah scholar, was a Talmid Chacham, but he became a professor to chemistry. I guess that in their family, that is a complete failure. So he was not a great giant and genius of Torah. So, but he, of course, he was a very nice spring of stories about the family. So Rav Lichtenstein spoke with him once, and he was told the following story. So Rav Shmuel Yaakov told Rav Lichtenstein, you know why my brother, Rav Yosef Dov, became the giant Torah of the generation, and I am only, again, a chemistry professor? So he says, a freshman because of age gaps. So our father would learn with us together. So he would explain a certain concept. ומיד לאחר מכן שואל את רבי יוסף דוב, פרשטייסט? Did you understand? פרשטייסט? האמנם הבנת? ואחי, so יוסף דוב, לפעמים לא תמיד, so sometimes he did not understand what his father taught him. No, that I think is legitimate, right? So you would say, no, I didn't understand. You don't understand? father would shout, הלכה, היה אומר אבא, מכבד אותו בשתי סטירות לחי. So he would hit him for not understanding, because in the Soloveitchik family, not understanding is because you are intellectually lazy. If I explain it as I should, and you didn't understand, that means that you had someone else. This is just like a child running to the road for us. or putting his hands into a... Now, I do not recommend, don't do it at home. I want to be very clear. It's part of what Rav Lichtenstein is writing this article. So very honestly, he says that's what they were doing there. I don't think that's the right thing we should do now. It's a different world altogether. It's a different world because then the first half of the 20th century in Lithuania is not the same as the first half of the 21st century here in Eretz Israel. And also, this family is its own league, its own universe. But says Rav Shmuel Yaakov, Abba Chazar v'limed. So after striking him twice for not understanding, his father taught him again. ושב ושאל את אביו, עכשיו אתה כבר מבין? Verstehen, how you understand? Say again. No, two strikes. You see a devotion for learning. והכי יוסף דוב, the brother, our hero, Yosef Dov, would say again, but I still, after being hit, I still don't understand. And the father would explain 3 times and 4th time until you don't understand. I says Rav Shmuel Yaakov, I immediately understood. But that is why he became Rav Yosef Dov Soloveitchik, and I became not Rav Yosef Dov Soloveitchik.
You also had a brother, Aaron.
That's right. Excuse me. You're right. I apologize. Of course. No, I was mistaken. Rav Velvele was the brother of Rav Moshe Soloveitchik. You're absolutely right. I apologize. My mistake. Thank you. That's right. Rav Aaron Soloveitchik was very important. That's right. וכך סיים שמואל יעקב, מתוך אי ההבנה של הרב, מתוך ההבנה שלי, הוא צמח והיה לגדול בישראל, ואני יצאתי כפי שיצאתי. So he says that's why I didn't reach the same madriga, that is because I didn't have the same devotion for Torah learning. But that's how things, and he learned with his father for close to 10 years. And that's how things were. I guess that when he was 15, he was not, I hope, did not hit him anymore. But you can understand that that's a very strict method of learning. And now they say that in the first 2 decades that the Rav of Soloveitchik would teach in YU, he was very, very strict. No, it didn't, physically didn't touch them. But he was very, very strict. Again, because he saw that if someone, he would ask a question that you were expected to answer, and you didn't answer, that means that you didn't prepare the shiur. That means that you do not take Torah seriously. If you don't take Torah seriously, don't be here. Torah is something that you need to devote your life for. That was the concept. Again, it was not something you come in order to be entertained. That's something you come because that's your life. It's not your life, then you shouldn't be here. So again, we are in a very different place in many aspects. However, that is the type of house that Rav Soloveitchik was going from. 1920, now, for that, he's living with his father, as I said, Gemara. But his mother is teaching him also to read Russian. He read Pushkin, he read other Russian authors famous at the time. And later, his mother is able to convince his father that he also must attend the gymnasium in order to earn what we would call today Teudat Bagrut, right, the high school diploma. Now, he also had private tutors. The bottom line is that he was given also secular education. And in 1920, he decided to, in 1922, excuse me, he decided to pursue this secular education in Warsaw University. He was there for 3 semesters learning Madei HaMedina. Madei HaMedina is politics. State science. And then he moved in 1926, he moved to Berlin, where he got a master and then a doctorate from the University of Berlin. Excuse me, not the University of Berlin, it's Humboldt. It's another university, famous university there. He learned basically philosophy, economy, physics, and math. Now, he wanted to write his doctorate on Rambam, as you can imagine, and Aflaton. However, he couldn't find Manche, a consular professor, yeah, the supervisor for his doctorate that would be able to guide him. Because he knew about Rambam, I guess, more than anyone in this university. So he had to abandon this plan. He wrote the suggestion, but he couldn't find any professor that would follow up with that. So he ended writing a doctorate on Hermann Cohen. Hermann Cohen was a very important Jewish philosopher for the German Jews. Now his project, Hermann Cohen's project, was I of course would not say it in German, but דעת התבונה ממקורות היהדות, meaning understanding how a religion of rationality can be hewed, it can be extracted from the sources of Yahadut. He wanted to prove that Yahadut can stand as a rational project and not just as a religious project. Right? That was what Hermann Cohen, I hope that makes some sense. That's what he was trying to achieve. And Rav Soloveitchik wrote the doctorate on him. He very much liked the idea of the halacha as an objective entity. If you remember the way I began the story, right, with the story about halacha as physics, as the secrets of the nuclear, of atomic energy. So halacha is not just something that is made up by human beings or not even made up by God. It represents, it reflects a real thing. A sukkah is really a sukkah, a Shabbat. There is really such a day. It's not something that we call Shabbat, or that God told us not to do something on just a peculiar day. There is an entity, an essence called Shabbat. So this is objectification, right, of halakha. So that he liked very much. However, he opposed other tendencies in Hermann Cohen philosophy, basically, obviously, to try to separate between the halakha and its giver. So in these ways, he was, of course, opposed. And his doctorate on Hermann Cohen is much, much beyond anything that I can read, right, either in English or in German. Or I guess that even if it would be translated into Hebrew, I would not be able to read it. So what I'm telling you now is what I read about from people who did read the doctorate. In 1939, his father. Now again, our time is short. In Berlin, he meets very important people. He meets with Rav Hutner, the young Rav Hutner, the young Lubavitcher Rebbe, not yet Lubavitcher Rebbe. Yeah, exactly. Rav Chaim Eller and others. Very interesting. In 1929, his father moves to New York to teach in YU, but he remains in Berlin in order to finish the doctorate, which he does finish in 1930. However, he passed the test as he was able to get the doctorate, but he asked for an extension because he wanted to write more. He felt that he is not completed yet. So although they were willing to give him doctorate. In 1931, he marries his wife, Tonya Levit, which was a type of a surprise. It was a shidduch. She was also a student in Jena University, where she got a doctorate in education. Now, she didn't come from a family of great Torah scholars. She didn't come from a rich family. So for him, it was to marry, I apologize for the terms, but like a lay woman, right? A simple woman, right? It's like someone from the royal family in England marrying into. It was very strange for the people involved. However, he saw her qualities, obviously. And she was, to the rest of his life, she was his right hand. She was basically running Maimonides in Boston. Later, with Bezrat Hashem speak about that in our next session. And we would finish. He wrote a dedication to her in the book "The Lonely Man of Faith," Isha Emunah. You can see it in source Daled. Letonia, Isha balat ometz lev rav, right? A woman with a lot of courage. Hadar ilai. Right, great splendor, I guess. מחויבות מוחלטת, complete dedication, וכנות שאינה יודעת פשרות. And honesty which has no limits. So the book is called Isha Emunah Bodeh, the lonely man of faith, but it is dedicated to the woman that redeemed him from this loneliness. Unfortunately, when the Musad Rav Kook printed the Sefer, they omitted the dedication. Maybe they thought that it is improper that such an important Rav would dedicate to his wife with such words of love. However, when the Parliament reprinted the book a few years ago, then the dedication returned to its place. We would finish here. In 1932, he emigrated to the United States, but that opens the next stage in his life. So we would, Be'ezrat Hashem, speak about that, Im Yirtzeh Hashem, next week. Thank you. And again, as I said, if people want to comment or to give their own stories, I would be very happy to. He himself had 3 children. He had 2 daughters and 1 son.
Wow, this was very emotional. Wow.
Thank you, Rabbi.